In today's video, we're going to be checking out the Hot Toys Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice. This is the 1/6 scale collectible figure of Wonder Woman. Though Wonder Woman would get huge success with her first movie in 2017, this Wonder Woman, however, is based on her appearance in Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice, which was released to theaters in 2016. Let's grab a tape measure and get some dimensions for Wonder Woman. The figure stands exactly 12 inches in height. For display stand options, of course, because she comes from the Batman v Superman movie line, she's going to have herself a Batman v Superman crest display base. A fairly large display base, as you can see right there, almost a baseball diamond shape. You've got Wonder Woman very clearly indicated here on the front placard above that, Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice. It's a pretty good looking display base. I like the one that was also included with Batman and Superman respectively, as they all shared the same sort of base. Granted, it could have been a little bit lighter, but I understand more so now because the crack and the texture to the way the surface is, they wanted to go with a much lighter shade so that you can see it a little bit clearer. I would have preferred maybe a little bit of a slight darker kind of airbrushing around the edge of maybe the Bat logo, so it would have stood out amongst the otherwise pretty gray, consistent trend across the entire base. But as it goes for a display base, it's really nice. It's, you know, again, fits the profile of the character. When we do eventually have a look at the Justice League version of Wonder Woman, which I've already got pre-ordered, again, we'll get a very, very different display base instead. She does have a not quite an adjustable neck from the standpoint that you can really do anything with the neck itself. However, she does have the waist clip that can clip around her waist rather than instead using the crotch clip that most figures tend to have. It's a bit of a nuisance, unfortunately, because they don't have like a little adjustable screw on the side for the clip to actually slide up and down the rod here. Instead, what you have to do is take yourself a screwdriver and unscrew, loosen up the screw so that the clip can slide then up and down on the base. That's about the correct height, I should say, to how I want Wonder Woman clipped anyways, because if you attach the figure, it clips right above her skirts, and just minding the strap that goes across her shoulder, it's ideally that's about the best place I would think to display the figure without running the risk of course clipping the skirt, which is a big issue I have really with the figure. So I said I would say I wouldn't really necessarily need to adjust this any further than what it's doing right now. That's about as the proper height I would say I would want the stand to be at. A couple of things I've already gone ahead and added to the figure, one of which being the strap that goes across her shoulder, and on the side will holster the lasso of truth, and on the side she'll have a section for her, I think for her sword. Granted that she also has the hilt, kind of little looplets here on the back of her strap where you can feed the sword through. I've already gone ahead and done that. I mean, all I did really was just to take the head off, and then I fed this to the front so that you would have these little clasps on either side, and then making sure, of course, you would have the loops on the back for the sword. I've also gone ahead and taken off the gauntlet, of course, remove the hand, then the gauntlet, and I've already gone ahead and slid on the little arm bracelet that she has over top of the one bicep. Just a few little pre-review things that I've already done to set up the figure so we can spend more time looking at the figure itself. Well, what better place to start with the figure than the figure's head? I will say I think it looks like Gal Gadot. Other reviewers have indicated that they don't see it themselves. Now, granted, that's opinion-based. I feel as if the more I look at the figure, the more I think it does look very much like Gal Gadot. I think it does have a really good likeness of her. From the side, I don't think maybe as much, but certainly from the front of the figure, and that's primarily where you're going to want to be displaying the figure, I think it looks very much like her. Hot Toys went the route of giving her real doll hair as opposed to sculpted hair. A good contrast in comparison would be, say, the Ellen Ripley that we will be looking at in a future video versus this one right here. This one I think could get away very easily with using doll hair, as I think it does work quite well. Generally, when you get figures out of box and they are using real hair, sometimes the hair gets a little crazy. I guess being that her hair is naturally curly anyways, it seems to work quite well for this figure. Whereas figures, say for example, like Black Widow, I found taking Black Widow and Scarlet Witch out of packaging that the hair seemed way too extreme. This is just like the right amount. I've seen some people also adding product to the hair itself to kind of keep the curls tight and to prevent any fraying of hair. The frays of hair don't really bother me nearly as much. I think everything kind of comes together quite well, to be in all honesty, for the hair. Now, that's not to say my opinion may change from, say, other people reviewing this figure, and that's perfectly fine. Everybody's entitled to their opinion. I so happen to think that I think it looks quite a bit like her. Unfortunately, when you do move the hair to the side, it's one of the common go-tos that Hot Toys does rely on, is that they sculpt not only the sideburns, but they also darken the area behind her ears. It's not quite the most realistic of colors, especially when you match it to that of the hair. It does look drastically off. But to be fair, the hair is so long as it is anyways, it's going to be covering over those areas. You're not necessarily going to see them. Even like the areas of the sideburns, which would be something that I would be concerned if I could see more of. But again, like if you're going to just style the hair over top of it, you're really not going to see it. As Hot Toys generally do when they go to their figures as well, press release images of what the figure looks like may drastically change to what we end up getting in hand. If you looked at the original production photos, like the early press release photos of this particular figure, she did not only not sport open teeth as visible here, but she also seemed to have a very slightly different face. And I am so glad that they ended up going back to the drawing board and correcting the face, as I think the original face would have been really disappointing. This face, again, really resonates for me, Gal Gadot. It really resonates to me how Wonder Woman looks in Batman v Superman, and of course in her appearances of her standalone movie and in Justice League. Now we are going to be getting, of course, a Justice League 6-scale figure release of Wonder Woman. It's time will tell sort of thing as to how drastically different that figure is going to be from this figure. This may be one of those figures that you could potentially just pass on in favor of the more later released Wonder Woman. Kind of like the same with Batman as well. You could just hold off getting the Batman v Superman Batman, eventually getting yourself the Suicide Squad Batman, or also you could get yourself the Justice League Batman. So sometimes timing to release of figures can play a big role as to whether you pick them up. Because this figure's Justice League release is, I think, going to be released next year, early next year, it doesn't really say too much whether you would necessarily need to pick up this figure. I did definitely really want to get this one for myself, so I don't feel all that disappointed that I'm going to be picking up perhaps almost a very similar copy to this one in her Justice League counterpart. I'm sure anybody researching this figure probably also knows the slight controversy with regard to the fact that she's using a rubber skin. The skin is comprised of plastic and rubber, like a mixture of the two, and it's basically been molded with the joints inside the body. Of course, as that goes, your posability is a little limited, and all the more reason why at the beginning of this review, with my different poses and stuff like that, I kept it to a very safe mark. I certainly wanted to bend the knee and have her, well, to have her in the stance that she had in No Man's Land, where she was crouched down and having the bullets reflecting off the shield, but I didn't really want to gamble at bending those arms all that much. You get a little bit of give, and we'll look at the articulation at a later point of this review, but it's to the point where even like displaying the figure, I'm not going to probably keep her in any permanent drastic poses. I'm probably going to be keeping her more so in like a museum stance. Maybe shield in one hand, sword in the other, vice versa, and I'll probably just be having her standing basically as what you see right here. I'm not going to go all that drastically crazy, I think, with bending her arm considerably, bending the knee, anything like that, where it could prevent or could cause some permanent indentations in the rubber. We don't really know yet to the full extent of how much this rubber will be affected over time. maybe it may not be as bad of an issue, but certainly bending the arms for a long period of time, I could imagine would leave permanent creases, like in the arms, the shoulders, for example, and even in the legs. So again, I'm going to keep it very, very safe here. One thing, though, I do mention, well, one thing I want to mention, is by incorporating the rubber skin over the body, you do, in the defense of the figure, get a pretty seamless looking body. You don't see any of the joints, especially for characters such as Wonder Woman, where so much of her flesh is exposed. Her skin is so exposed that you would see a very noticeable socket where the shoulder would be, elbow bend, and all that kind of stuff. By keeping it seamless like this, it does not only look like the actress, but the body also looks like it's realistic as well. I can only hope that the camera is picking up some of this, but there's these nice little natural flecks in the skin tone, like regular skin, really. You got all these little dots and freckles and spots and stuff like that. So it's not like necessarily, because if you get anything that has a rubber skin, for example, like, well, the Physine bodies with Physine bodies tend to have a very neutral looking body tone to them. Here they've actually gone in and it looks like they've given different variations of skin tone, different colorings and stuff to it, so it doesn't just look like a rubber skin. By contrast, the face obviously is plastic, and I think from the face to the neck, which is where you would see the two drastic changes in plastic to rubber, I do think it's actually pretty close in contrast. It doesn't look like it's drastically like a head placed on top of a rubber body, where you can clearly see that one starts and stops, and then of course the rubber body then continues onward. Having a look at Wonder Woman's body, it consists obviously of the Amazonian armor, so she's got the top cranberry bodice and then the lower skirt. This is one thing I do want to get out of the way right off the bat, because I know I'm going to forget about it, is I don't like the material that they used for the skirt. It's textured, yes, and it does have some really nice detailing to it, but I don't like the thin makeup of it. It feels very thin and flimsy. It almost feels as if you ever got like a really cheap, almost faux leather bound book, it's almost to that texture. It's almost like a very thin belt even. The one side looks like it's almost more of a material, and then they've printed like almost like a glossed ink or something like that over top of it. So like you've got more movie accurate sort of texturing to it, and then you can see underneath how that material, it's very paper thin though. I would worry that this would clip, tug on anything, or even really the clip of the waist. When I was attaching it to the figure, I was worried the whole time that any bit of the skirt would get caught in that clip. And the last thing I certainly would want to do is rip this. I can't imagine this would be a material that would be rippable, as there are some materials like envelopes and stuff like that that are tear-proof. I would hope that they would go the route of something that is tear-proof, but I'm not going to entertain the idea of trying to rip it to prove if that's right or not. I mean, if I could be overly critical, one thing I do find is that the body seems a little poofy. It seems a little swollen. I mean, she's not... Wonder Woman is obviously... and Gal Gadot playing Wonder Woman she's a very thin actress. The torso here does seem like it's a little on the swollen side. And I don't mean any offense by saying that, but it does seem like the torso area comes across a little poofy for my liking, especially like in the top chest area here. It seems a lot more swollen and larger than maybe how it appears in the movie. Spending some time looking at the skirt and now just looking at the bodice, the top part of her armor here. It's got some really nice texturing here, almost akin to like wood. You almost see like a little small wood grain to it that makes up the overall of the body. And I think they did a really good job in the movie of giving her a more realistic, updated take on the classic Wonder Woman costume. I mean, these are traditional colors, yes, but they are muted in the sense that you get a more darker cranberry, a darker blue, and the gold and silver accents here. Of course, she gets herself a pair of gauntlets on either side. These are swappable as well. You can swap them out to the more energy or absorbed power infused gauntlets, which I'll show you in a second. But again, those are nicely decorative. Little etchings there and the gold trim on the top and the bottom. I like also that they've given her, and that's more so to the design of the character in the movie, but they've wrapped the fingers, giving it a more, it seems and it comes across to me reading more like a warrior, that she would have bandaged her hands for battle here. Of course, looking at the boots, again, a nice updated take to the original Wonder Woman costume. I really like the fact that the boots are halved, like they're two halves coming together, and then they're strapped as she's put them onto her feet. A little bit of that gap, you can see like her bare foot as well as the bare leg here. And again, some really nice detailing. Even like the gold aspect of it looks like it would have been hammered out and forged. It's got almost like a crude element to it that I think looks quite nice. And I like that looking at it, it almost comes across like an armadillo armor plating, where it's not one seamless boot, but instead rather you've got the plate and then individual platelets that make up her feet here. We've really spent a lot of time looking at the Wonder Woman figure. Let's have a look at the accessories that come included with her. For starters, she comes with this really nice looking shield that is almost like a bluish, slightly bluish gray in color. It's got some nice gold trim around the outer parameter here, some nice little rivet points here, and it's got some really good like texture work done to it. As well, above that, you have some Amazonian scripture that runs all the way around the outer parameter of the shield. Flip it around, and you have something very similar to what we would get with Captain America, in the sense that you're going to loop the arm through, and then you're going to attach the hand to the other looplet, and then you're going to attach the hand to the forearm. Let me show you how that works. So I took the hand off, and then all you have to do is just slide. You can keep the gauntlet on and slide the arm all the way through. Then find, let me just grab it over here, then find a hand that would be suitable for gripping, and you can grip the hand around the loop and then simply just attach the hand back into the socket of the forearm here. Though I'm not really going to get excessively crazy with Wonder Woman's pose, I will, however, probably display her with the shield because I think it does look quite good with the figure here. Next up, we have Wonder Woman's sword, which has some really nice blue and gold accents here in the hilt, along with some of that Amazonian scripture carved and etched into the blade itself. The blade actually is closer to almost more of a gunmetal silver than a regular silver, and I love that they've tarnished or slightly off-colored the blue and the gold, so it doesn't look necessarily like a pristine weapon, instead something the Amazonians probably have been using in frequent battles here. Rounding out her weapons, though, she also comes with a lasso of truth. The lasso is already wired up in the sense that there's a little wire that's kind of keeping it all bunched and looped together. Now, as you would expect it, because it is a wire, the actual lasso is wired, that means you can also bend this and mold this to the way that you want to display it. Maybe you want to display Wonder Woman, for example, with the lasso, and you can certainly do that as well. If you don't want to display her holding the lasso, you can also, she has this little looplet here on the side of her belt or her shoulder strap, and you're just going to loop it through there and then attach it. There's a little peg here, and attach it into place. Generally, it works quite well. There are times when I've tried to attach it, and the peg is just so very small that it hasn't stayed in place, and a lot of times the loop will kind of come off in the process. I will, though, again, likely display Wonder Woman with the lasso looped through the looplet rather than having her holding it. Lastly, she comes with a pair of gauntlets, basically essentially the same things that she's wielding right now, other than the fact that these are a translucent orange. These are to simulate the fact that like in Wonder Woman and in Batman v Superman, any time that she is hit with anything that's energy based, she can then store it in her bracelets and basically reflect and fire off the energy from those. I do think the effect looks quite good, as they've given a little bit of like airbrushing around the either edges of it, and you've still got the silver and the gold, but as you can see, it's been very much muted in favor of looking as if the gauntlets are glowing instead. And to change those out, you just simply go ahead and pop the hand out of the socket. Be very careful sliding this off. I noticed the first time I did it, it seemed to want to stick to the rubber skins, but once you've got that off, Just slide this back in, and you might just want to find yourself slightly wiggling it to get it back onto the forearm, and then go ahead and just replace the hand. Just plug that into place. The glowing gauntlets are a nice effect, but unfortunately this is kind of where the figure gets limited on its posability. It's nice to have them, but I would not even think to try to bend the arms in such a maybe of a cross kind of pose, as if she's reflecting the energy back. Again, just with the nature of the way that the elbows bend, as we get into the articulation, like even the instructions indicate there's very, very little leeway that you can bend these elbows and bend these arms. I wish you could have actually bent them a little bit better. This is where regular articulation could have worked quite better, because you could have crossed the arms and having it look as if she's reflecting back the energy. As we're about to look at the articulation, I just want to show you the instruction guide. This, read thoroughly before you start handling around the figure, because there are going to be very, very tight specifics as to how much motion and movement you can actually move the figure. Just before we do that, actually, I just want to show you this little image right down here. This is how the original figure was slated to look. And the mouth, I have to admit, it does look like it's slightly a little bit more open, but by contrast, let me just bring the figure down here, for example. By contrast, I think the final figure looks a heck of a lot better than the one that's actually originally, well, this was the original press release here. So let's have a look at this together so that you guys can see exactly what sort of articulation you can get away with. For the head, you can tilt the head up before turning it to the preferred position. Otherwise, it may cause paint fading. I've seen that before, certainly with other 6-scale figures. Tilt the head to a sculpt preferred position within 30 degrees as shown. So again, you don't want to tilt the head too far back. 20, within 30 degrees. They've even actually indicated here for the head rotation and rocking, try to stick within a 20 degree turn. For the arms, you can only move the arms by 60 degrees out. Collectively, for a forward motion, you want to generally stick to about an 80 degree angle forward and only a 60 degree angle back. The elbows can also bend, but again, you're only really going to want to bend them within the angles listed here. So an outward hinge of the elbow, keep it to around a 20 degree, and then the forward in, you want to keep it to about a 40 degree. And then lastly, the legs. It says don't excessively move the legs in huge angles, otherwise the legs may damage the costume. So this is obviously too far of an angle that you want to bend them at. You want to keep them to a little bit more of a relaxed bend, and keeping the knees and the bend of the leg only at a 90 degree angle. So based on that, really, and sticking to the manual as our guide, we really don't want to move the head too far back and forth. We want to generally keep it as little as possible. Equally said, I mean, you can rotate the head. That's not a problem because that's just on the ball joint. The bigger concern, obviously, is rotating the head up and down. It's not so much the head. Let me just pop up the head so you can see. It's not so much this ball joint that is the issue. The head can easily move up and down that, as every other 6-scale figure can. It's the fact that the lower ball joint sits within the rubber neck. So you don't want to move that too far back and forward, or you could potentially do some damage to the neck area here of Wonder Woman. The arms, again, you want to be very, very careful. I would suggest doing it in very, very small, subtle motions. Very carefully move those arms out. Last thing you want to be doing is really jerking the arms out at an excessive rate, or really at a fast rate, because that could cause breakage in the actual top of the shoulder area here. The arms do move forward and they do move back, but again, being very slowly, very carefully bending those elbows, kind of just the whole time gauging how much give you have in the arms. Always understand how much that arm's going to allow you to bend it before it starts hitting resistance. The elbows aren't so much the issue, as my bigger issue seems to be with the shoulders. I really worry, even to the fact that the shoulders technically can rotate out at 60 degrees. I would not personally entertain the idea. That's just my opinion. You want to get the figure for yourself. and try to bend the figure at a greater angle. Granted, I've seen reviewers bend the arms to a much further degree, to the point where the arms are almost straight. But again, for a figure that's over $200, I don't really want to run the risk of doing that, because mine would be the one time that I would do it, and I'd hear a little break in the shoulder here. So rounding out the rest of the articulation, the legs go forward, back, and out. You can see that there's a ball joint system right inside there. The legs are not hindered by the sense of the way that the rubber skin is, rather than instead, you don't want to be damaging the skirt. The skirt being such a thin material, as we've already discussed, you don't really want to move the legs too far forward, as that could bend or potentially even break the material used for the fabric. Lastly, the legs, and again, you want to just be very, very careful. The legs can bend, well, they can bend at a 90-degree angle, but again, being very, very careful the whole time to do it. In fact, actually, one of the easiest things to articulate is the ankle, as the ankle is just using a traditional universal joint in the foot. So the foot does rotate back and forth. You've also got a slight rocker, and you can move the foot up and down as well. They've allowed enough clearance between the lower plates of the foot and the top plate of the calf guard, the shin guard, that it does allow for enough clearance to move that foot. It doesn't seem limited at all. So when it's all said and done, am I truly disappointed with this figure? The answer I would say is no. I went into this picking up this figure knowing exactly what I was going to be getting. I looked at other reviews, I looked at images online, and I knew that a over-layered skin rubber outfit, well, essentially a body over top of the articulation, was going to limit what posability I could put into the figure. And truth be told, I really don't display my figures in dynamic poses anyways. Generally, I put them in more museum poses, maybe slightly bending the elbows and maybe spreading the legs slightly, and that's good enough for me. Long term is where I worry about where this figure is going to live. Whether the rubber over time is going to start to break down, whether, seams and little tears are going to start developing in the skin. That's really my bigger concern, but that's something that may happen years from now. I really hope it doesn't happen at all, but it would be something that would happen years from now. Traditional articulation could have worked quite well for this figure, but I really do like the seamless look of the body. About the only thing I really would say as a nitpick to the figure is I just don't like the material that they used for her skirt. It's very thin, and I feel, if anything, that may not last as long as the rubber body that she is currently sporting. The accessories are a nice touch. I, again, think that the likeness looks very much quite like Gal Gadot, and I think I like the rooted hair. This is a figure that could have used sculpted hair, but I think doll hair makes this particular figure, which may not be across the board, but I think it makes this particular figure much more realistic than sculpted hair. The base is a nice touch, maybe a little bit too big for where I'm going to be displaying her, but I do like the fact that they always include display bases. As a whole, again, I really like the figure. You may necessarily want to hold off and get the Wonder Woman that's going to be coming out for Justice League. I don't really know how much varying differences are going to be between this particular figure and the Justice League. The Justice League version is also going to have a deluxe release version that's also going to have that black fur kind of cloak that she wears throughout the Wonder Woman movie. Of course, that would be a reason why I would want to pick up the figure as well, because then I could display the two different Wonder Women in their respected different looks. Facially, I don't know, maybe it may look different enough from the Justice League that would warrant picking her up, but maybe a lot of people may want to hold off getting this particular figure and maybe get what they deem to be a more superior looking Wonder Woman with the Justice League release. Of course, with new releases, they always have new improved head sculpts, but I really am happy with this head sculpt. I'm glad that I picked it up. I'm not too bothered by the overlaid of the skin, and the fact that Justice League Wonder Woman is just right around the corner doesn't really all that bother me either, because I'd be happy to have multiple Wonder Women on display. Today, nonetheless, we were having a look at the Hot Toys. This was the Wonder Woman from the Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice line. A great looking figure. Don't let a rubber overlay skin kind of deter you from picking up the figure, because I really do think it's a nice, beautiful looking figure. It's probably one of the best female sculpts I've seen and have currently in my collection. Speaking of collection, if you guys also wanted to go back and have a look at some of my previous Hot Toy reviews, I've got a playlist on this channel that you can check out and watch at your viewing pleasure. If you guys also haven't had a chance to subscribe to this channel, make sure you hit that little subscribe button that's just below this video, and you'll never miss a beat when it comes to future videos. As always, guys, thanks for watching as you always do. I'll see you next time.